Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're chatting with Albert Brier, an accomplished executive with over 16 years of experience delivering major projects across various sectors and continents. Currently, Albert is driving Canada's position as a global leader in the energy and mining industries with a focus on cost management, risk analysis, critical path scheduling, and stakeholder management. So first of all, welcome to the show, Albert, and do you want to give us a little bit oversight on what you're doing and maybe a little bit of your background?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I sure will. And thanks also for that glowing introduction. It makes me sound a lot more impressive than maybe I actually am. So my name again, Albert Brier. I'm the Director of Project Controls for Dokainish Company. We are a project controls and system implementations company out of Toronto is our head office. We also have satellite offices in Calgary and New York and coming soon, the UAE. So we are very much in growth mode these days. So
awesome.
Speaking for myself, I've been supporting Dokainish Company's various clients and projects for the past 3.5 years. But as you mentioned, I've got over 16 years of experience in the project controls and project delivery world, filling a bunch of different roles. The thing that kind of got me started in project world is scheduling. So you mentioned critical path method scheduling, and that's been a big element of my career for a long time. I'm occasionally regarded as a subject matter expert in it, and it's interesting to see how the world of project scheduling has evolved, especially in the post COVID environment where we have a lot of people doing this work remotely who would have been lacing up boots and getting on job sites before.
Right.
So, and that's certainly been my experience with it, where I spend a lot of time boots laced up, FRCs on, out on job sites doing. Well, I was about to say doing real work, but that's not true. So you're using a clipboard to, take notes on other people's real work.
we think it's real work. The people on the ground doing the work probably don't think the same.
No, indeed. No, they definitely don't. They're like, oh, here comes that guy again.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's been a fun journey. I've had the extreme fortune of getting to see lots and lots of different kinds of projects over that period of time. And I've been really excited to bring that knowledge and experience to bear at Dokainish Company, in part because we have such an incredibly talented team of junior consultants. So a big chunk of my role these days is training, mentoring, and otherwise supporting them as they go off and do their good work. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and what I'm up to these days.
Awesome. So when you talk about the project controls and deliveries and things like that, so to me that's really kind of overall project management. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap between project controls and project management. And the way I like to explain it is when you are at a very small size scale, like when you're talking about a very small project, the project controls manager and the project manager and the project execution manager and the project construction manager, those are all the same person, right? They're the project manager. So all those roles roll up to a single role at a small size class. But then when you start to get into the larger projects, like the some you might call the mega projects, or even things that are in the in-between space, in the kind of 10 to 100 or even 100 to a billion range, you start to see those roles split up between different people, because when there's a large enough project team, the project manager's job shifts away from, the technical side of things and making sure that the actual work is being tracked. That is still in one of their core responsibilities, but their job becomes one of integration management, communications management, and personnel management. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a project manager on a large construction program needs the help of a capable project controls manager to make sure that all of the bits and pieces of the cost, schedule, and risk get managed correctly. And it's not a given that'll happen without somebody, kind of minding the store, as it were. Right. Especially on those really large projects. So
yeah, what would be some of those large projects? First of all, I think it's kind of funny that the mid-sized projects are 100 million to a billion. That in my mind is a very damn large project. But what is a large project? Like what would you guys have worked on?
Well, I kind of tipped my hand a little bit when I gave those numbers because I've mostly been in the large capital world in my experience. And large capital just means like at the end of the spend that you're executing to do the thing that you're doing, you wind up with a physical asset, like a large piece of construction, like a new thing, and I'm being intentionally vague here because it could be anything. Like I've worked on a lot of building projects. I've worked on some refinery projects, fire rebuilds, upgrades, the occasional offshore oil rig, although I've not been super involved in that kind of thing. But the point is that these are very large physical objects that get built. So I think most projects that get, and by the way, this is a statistic I have no way of backing up, but I think most projects that get executed these days are likely IT projects. And a lot of project management, best practices and discipline, like the PMI, for example, they've heavily skewed. I don't know, skewed is the wrong word. They've tailored their guidance to IT projects because there are so many IT project managers out there, and IT projects that crest $100 million are extremely rare. Okay,
Right.
so you have to be talking about really huge IT deployments to be getting into that size class. But for a construction project, $100 million buys you a medium-sized office building. Okay.
Yeah.
And even that these days in Canadian dollars is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
So, there's a different kind of expectation set when you're talking about that large cap space.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
Interesting that so you're really saying that the end product isn't necessarily determinant on what you guys are doing from an involvement. It's, whether this is an office building, a bridge, a refinery, anything like that, you're really going in and saying, no, we come in and manage projects. We manage the deliverables. We help with the scheduling. That's the component that we're working with. Is that right?
That is right, and that's a very big chunk of what we do, and it's the majority of my experience in the project world. This has what we call the role that I used to fill most of my career is called an owner's rep or an owner's representative, where I would be the person kind of interacting with the day-to-day project personnel to make sure that the owner's getting a good deal and that the contractors are doing what they say they're doing, and that's a big chunk of what we do in at Dokainish Company. On top of that, we also look after efficiency in other ways. Like we have our start actually when Tarek Dokainish, our CEO and founder, when he started the company back in 2011, he started it as a system implementation company because he, as a project controls expert who'd had a lot of experience on the IT side of the fence, realized that a lot of the IT system implementations around project controls are being done by people who don't really understand project controls. And that leads to some, mismatches in expectations and some products being, selected and implemented that may not actually suit the needs of the organization. So he founded the company as a way of bringing that project controls expertise into IT space and creating a more of a unified approach to doing system selection, process improvement, governance upgrades, implementations, integrations, etc. So that's actually a big chunk of what we do at Dokainish Company is that you can almost think of it as like if I'm on the technical kind of project control side of the fence, a big chunk of what we do is actually on the business analytics and project management side of the fence, and even some IT consulting, as I mentioned.
Okay. It always actually surprises me on smaller projects, and now I'm talking in the single $1 million. It might be like a
sure, yeah,
build out of a space or something like that. But it always surprises me that owners don't use an owner rep like a project manager, because now you're solely kind of relying on the contractor and what they're telling you, and is kind of all you can go by unless your expertise is in that area. So yeah, that always really surprises me when people aren't using that, because there's nobody there to keep them accountable from a timeline, from a cost perspective, to ensure that the work is being done as agreed upon. So obviously on the bigger space, you would expect that, but yeah, I'm still always surprised that we don't see that on the smaller projects as well.
Well, there's a song and dance that happens during the procurement phase of any project where everybody has to prove, why they are on the project. You know what I mean? Like everybody's trying to carve out their little niche and where they fit. The the example you were giving is like if you just throw the keys to your project over to your contractor, then you've got the wolf guarding the hen house, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or maybe fox. I don't know. Wolf is a little aggressive, but And that's not necessarily something that you or I would recommend for sure. But having said that, sometimes there just aren't resources available to do it any other way. So at
Yeah.
that point, and this is actually a consulting service that we also provide, we take a look at contracts in the pre-construction phase to make sure that owners are getting a good deal when they go out and issue these requests for proposal and start evaluating bids from these contracting companies that, and I've worked for and with a number of contracting companies that have consulting arms, that have a lot of really intelligent, honest, ethical people working for them that really want things to go well for their clients, because when projects go well, everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
Everybody makes money, assets come together quickly. The project world is enriched by, the experience of the project and et cetera. Everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya. So your average contractor is trying to make that happen. Okay.
Yeah.
But your average contractor is also in competition with a whole bunch of other contractors, and they have to play the game or else they don't get to play the next time.
Yeah.
So there's kind of there's a predatory cycle there, and I'm not describing anyone in particular as the predator here. It's just that, it creates this like false sense of lowered expectations when you start talking about contracting out even the smallest projects. Okay.
Right.
It's kind of a truism that contractors make their money on change orders, and that is largely true in the owner's rep space. That's something that we really have to look out for.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that coin is that the reason why it's true is because they can't make money on the base contract. Okay. So if you don't want your contractors, and by the way, this is a little bit of free advice from yours truly, but if you don't want your contractors to fleece you on change orders, then perhaps you should consider paying them fairly to begin with,
Yeah.
And that begins with, fully defining your scope, getting your arms around your risk, and those kinds of things. And those are all good reasons why, having owners reps, even on the smallest projects, makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's worth also mentioning that a lot of those things that I just described, like bringing in outside consultants to do pre-tender estimates or risk analyses or host workshops or review contracts, those are expensive. Those are expensive propositions. Like folks like myself, we don't do this job for free. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you want to spend $2 million on your project, you can't carve out a couple $100,000 of that just for, pre-tender consulting work. So one of the kind of unsolved mysteries of project controls consulting is, how do you square that circle, right? How do you find a way to offer those very necessary services to your clients running smaller projects without breaking the bank and turning them from small projects into medium-sized ones just because you've got a big consulting crew working on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Albert, what's your background? Like, what brought you to this point?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because my background is not what you would expect it to be. Most of the people in my kind of position or anything even remotely like it have an engineering degree or a master's of construction management or something like that. By comparison, I'm quite poorly educated. I have a bachelor's of history. And after I graduated with my bachelor's of history, I went and became a history teacher. So for a few years in the mid 2000s, I was a history teacher at a high school in Houston, Texas. And from there, I just started putting my name out there for some, a lot of this may be less true now than it was before, but a lot of teachers who are looking to maybe get out of the teaching business, they go to like technical writing or some other kind of like roughly adjacent field, right? Like some of them get into sales or they get into that kind of thing. And if you do a decent job as a technical writer or as a salesperson, you might wind up managing projects, because it's kind of a truism in the project management space that if you're too good at your job, you wind up as a project manager, and if you're not good enough, you wind up as a project manager. So a little joke, but in my case, I put a bunch of applications out there. I had a personal connection to a hiring manager at a consulting company called Faithful and Gould, which some of your listeners may have heard of. It's I would say, pretty large consultancy in the project controls space. Like they got their start back in the UK post-war as a a quantity surveying outfit. So quantity surveying is the thing I was describing earlier. You lace up your boots, grab a clipboard, and go count stuff. Okay.
Hmm.
So that was Faithful and Gould's bread and butter for a very long time. So when I was hired into the US branch, and I was organizing the supply room, picking people up from the airport, assisting the admins with building spreadsheets, and just generally kind of trying to make myself useful. And that led to going to client sites and doing some of that administrative work for them. And that led to picking up some additional skills. And I had the extreme good fortune of working with some very talented and generous individuals who really, really were helpful to me in learning the trade, particularly in scheduling. And there's a slim chance that he's listening to this right now. I just want to shout out to Mike Johnson. Like, you're in my thoughts, man. You really taught me a lot. So people like Mike, who were just really, really helpful to me in picking up those basic skills and getting some early project experience, helped me to build a set of solid project controls related, like actionable skills that I could then go apply on projects. Okay. So you may remember back in 2008, there was a bit of a financial crisis.
Hmm.
So in Houston in 2008, there was also a hurricane. Hurricane Ike hit Houston in 2008. So I had just switched over from teaching to my new career in project controls in June of
Yeah.
that year, and the hurricane, I believe, hit in September. So I was brand new, baby faced, the junior most consultant at that consultancy, and we had just shed a client in part because of the financial situation that was about to transpire. So we had lots and lots of people sitting on the bench and lots of layoffs happening, and then a hurricane hit.
Yeah.
So I felt like I changed careers and immediately was, in some kind of nightmare world where, oh my God, what did I do to myself? But I was very fortunate, and I had, as I said, lots of really good bosses and mentors who kept me busy during that time. And it meant that, every person was now doing 2 or 3 people's jobs. So I spent, 12, 14 hours on the phone every day trying to get, my clients serviced and, also talking to those mentors I mentioned. And, once I get off the phone with the client, I'll give them a call and be like, oh my God, what do I do?
Help,
Uh,
help.
yeah, exactly. So, a few months of doing that, you start to closely resemble the thing that you were pretending to be, like an expert in some of these things. So, it's that whole fake it till you make it thing. I'm not going to mention any of my clients by name because they don't need to know that I was faking it at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, so sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, no, no. Please keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say like that, I had the good fortune of having some success in those early roles, and I was able to spin that off into some additional client work and, bringing in a handful of new clients. And, to make a long story short, which, it's as soon as somebody says that, it's too late. But to make a long story short, I wound up in Canada to help build Imperial Oil's new campus in Quarry Park, which I'll actually be visiting later today.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Okay. So that's the route of bringing you up into the northern country here.
Yeah, that's right. There's a strong link between Calgary and Houston because of
Yeah.
the oil business.
Yeah.
And, as you may know, Imperial is an affiliate organization of the ExxonMobil Corporation. And I was doing a lot of commercial project management work for ExxonMobil in Houston at the time. So when the need arose for a master scheduler to come to Calgary and manage their new campus build, I got the tap. So
Awesome. That's great. First of all, that's maybe the most diverse background I've heard of before, or diverse might be the wrong word, but the biggest career change for sure, going from teaching to running billion-dollar projects.
yeah, I think if you wanted to pick a kind word for it, it would be eclectic.
Eclectic.
And perhaps a less kind word would be bizarre. And depending on the day, I think of it both ways.
Well, that's it, fantastic, though. Fantastic and good for you. What do you think are some of the skills that you have that have maybe allowed you to be successful from a teaching perspective, then also successful in a very different industry like project management?
Well, I mean, another classic saw about project management is that it's like herding cats, right? And
Yeah.
you could very much make the same thing or same comment about trying to teach high school kids history. Because I don't know if you've given any thought to what the priorities of your average high school student are anytime recently, but I'd like you to just imagine where history falls on that list. It's pretty close to the bottom.
Yeah, it's low,
Uh,
low.
so yeah, it's very, very low. And like these are people who are much more interested in how their social lives are transpiring and what so and so said about them. And by the way, like super early days, pre iPhone, I was having, this experience. So I can only imagine what kinds of stuff teachers today are dealing with cell phones and the like. But
Yeah,
um, in my experience, trying to kind of communicate difficult concepts and complicated concepts to a bunch of disinterested people. That is a description that I could give to trying to explain why it's important to manage a critical path method schedule properly on a construction site.
right.
A lot of people just don't have time to hear it. They're busy doing something else. They need it boiled down, or they don't want to hear it at all. And so learning how to really tightly simplify and explain a concept without losing track of its kind of core principles, or I guess you could say dumbing it down too much. That's something that's a skill I picked up as a history teacher, and I
Yeah,
use it every day. I'm kind of infamous around the office for my I'm going to call them strained analogies that I use to explain esoteric project controls principles to people. I frequently compare them to things like farming, driving, and space exploration. So, go figure.
that's good though, right? When you're dealing with subject matter that's complex and that, the average person, we don't understand all those complexities. You need the analogy of something that we do understand to be able to grasp what that really means.
Yeah, exactly. And it's far easier to do that than to whip out a flow chart and start talking in technical jargon,
Yeah.
You can do that later. Like there's always time for the flow chart and there's always time for the jargon, but somebody's first interaction with something should be friendly and accessible and fun. And the
Yeah.
more fun people are having at work, the more productive they're likely to be, and the hungrier they're going to be to learn more things about what it is that you're doing. And a big, big chunk of my role has always been education. Being an owner's rep also means being the owner's coach and trying to help them understand what the next steps are, why they are that, and how they
Yeah.
can go about taking them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, Project management is one of those things that probably historically was almost like a blanket term, like everybody was a project manager of something, right? I think
Sure.
probably in the last 20 years and specifically in the last decade, I think that's really honed in and said, no, this is what a project manager is. And I think you're seeing that in the education system, even, universities have dedicated project management programs now that they didn't have before. Um, what advice would you give to somebody that is wanting to go into this project management field?
Well, that education route is a good one, but some of the best project managers I've met got started on tools, as we would call it, like actually
Yeah.
doing physical work in the field. It's tempting to think about, a university degree or even like a postgraduate certificate or something like that as being necessary for this work, but it's not. What is necessary for the work is practical experience.
Hmm.
So whatever is going to give you that practical experience, that should be, thing one. Okay. Thing two is finding, that set of mentors that I mentioned previously. There's no chance that I would be where I am if I hadn't had access to such fabulous people at Faithful and Gould and, elsewhere as well. I mean, I'm mentioning them because it's the first place that I worked, but I have great mentors and support here at Dokainish Company right now. And our clients teach me a lot. Every time I'm in a conversation with them, I learn something.
Yeah.
So it's about, getting that practical experience. If you're really just getting started, then trying to go be the boss from day one is a recipe for disaster and failure, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Go be, somebody's underling for a while. Go, learn how to weld and be a welder, be a pipe fitter, be a boiler maker.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of different avenues to that. I'm not trying to poo-poo the project management programs or MBAs of the world. It's all just different avenues that'll take you to the same place. And the truth is that, because I have a college degree, even though it is entirely unrelated to projects, you could argue, that gave me a bit of a leg up when I was applying for jobs. that eventually had kind of like project management flavoring. So getting a
Right.
degree is a great place to start. Kind of doesn't matter what your degree's in. If it's in project management, construction management, or engineering, that gives you an additional leg up. But as you're going through your academic journey, you're going to meet a lot of people who are there to help you and who have information and knowledge and skills that you will need. So find those people and hang on to them. Really just build we used to call it a little black book or a Rolodex. Build a Rolodex that's full of people you can count on, who, if you give them a call, they'll give you good advice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. What's next for you? What's on the horizon for you and for the company?
Well, we are, as I mentioned previously, continuing to expand our operations. We have a big push into risk coming up this year. So we've been building an extremely, I'm going to call it fun. I mentioned fun earlier. It's important to have fun at work. We have a pretty cool tool that we're developing for risk management and visualization of risk outputs that we're going to make a strong push towards selling this coming year. So I'll be involved in that in a big way. And I'm really looking forward to onboarding some new clients and helping them measure their the scale of their project risk and helping them to better understand it. So that's a big thing that's coming. We have some other things that I don't know if I'm really allowed to talk about, but coming soon to a Dokainish Company near you, or some appointments with Canadian companies that are on the tip of the tongue, especially if you're in Ontario. So that's next year is going to be a big one for us. So lots and lots of new work on the horizon.
And you mentioned something that you guys are going to be releasing fairly soon here. Just before we were on the podcast, you're talking about your own podcast that you guys were.
Yeah, that's right. So our director of marketing, Nate Habermeyer, he and I have a podcast called The Risky Planner. So The Risky Planner has a few episodes in the can, getting their final finishing touches, and we're in the process of getting all of our channel stuff figured out. And once we've got all that nailed, you'll see The Risky Planner out there, and you can follow Dokainish Company on LinkedIn, or myself, Albert Brier, on LinkedIn. Give me a follow, and you'll learn all the things you need to learn about how to find The Risky Planner and shove it into your ear holes. So.
Awesome. I'll make sure when we put our post out on this podcast, we'll include a link to that as well, or more information on that as well, so people can go there and track you guys down.
That's very much appreciated, Matt.
Well, Albert, I want to thank you for being on the show with us today. Certainly learned a lot and enjoyed having you on here. Thanks,
Matt. Same to you. Appreciate the opportunity.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.